My name is Crystal. Thank you so much for joining me today. As they mentioned, I come from the US, but I spent 5 years at a company called Gojek in Indonesia. And at Gojek, we are a transportation, food delivery, groceries, movie tickets, anything you can think of, mobile payments. We did it all. But when I joined, we only had 3 services. We did transportation, package delivery, and a little bit of grocery shopping. But before I moved halfway across the world to Indonesia, I asked, what data should I care about, and what do you already analyze? And I was given this, not a Post-it note, but a picture of a Post-it note. And they said, this is what we currently care about. There are some missing values. We're not really sure what they mean, but maybe you can ask an engineer and find out. And this is a critical starting point for me because I see many things in life, in product management, as I do in my everyday life. I like to think of things as a game with a fog of war. I like to play League of Legends. I'm not very good at Dota, but I've spent some time thinking about how games actually facilitate a representation of our product management careers and our product roadmaps. There is the fully visible area. That's your KPIs that you've been assigned by your manager. It's the product experiences we are working on and we push to development. It's our current scope of work. And then you have this foggy area. This might be the work of your manager or your peers, the PMs who also report to the same manager as you. It could be the KPIs that you've thought about but haven't really analyzed. And then you have the unknown area, which is the KPIs you've never even thought about, the metrics and analyses you've never done. Maybe you've taken a look at in the past but have completely become obfuscated as the business evolves and changes. And this map is something that we need to carve away and start to unfog as we do analysis. And so while this was the fully visible area I was given in 2015, I spent the next few years creating my own visible map, a Post-it note V2, where I could fully understand the databases that I worked on, what data meant for each product group. And this map was so valuable that within the next 2 years, I actually transitioned from head of data to head of growth. And as a head of growth, I quickly realized that product management does have roadmaps, product roadmaps, but we don't really have a map to tell us what to put on that product roadmap. How do we know what to work on next, and what metrics matter, and what our scope is, and how to expand upon that? That really felt like, as a new product manager, that you just had to push ideas with just enough data so that people didn't think you were totally crazy. And I spent more time pushing back on other people's crazy ideas than I did coming up with my own. And so I looked inward and I said, what do good product managers do? They work with designers. They work with user researchers. They listen to their users. And so I thought, maybe if I took a user researcher approach, and I looked at these fanciful ideas, these free ideas as data points, qualitative data that I could match with quantitative data, well, then that could be something like a product management altitude map. And so the altitude map is a framework that I still use to this day. I'm advising companies like YouTube, food delivery companies in South Korea, companies like Naked Wines in the UK, and I decided to organize the qualitative and quantitative data points to perform user research internally and understand what to do next as a product manager through the altitude map. And it's a visual representation of the different levels of work in a company and how they all connect together. And it can also illuminate whether or not there are disconnects or contradictions, something that we can use to push to our managers or higher leadership that something's not right here. And so it connects all of the company level goals, the company OKRs, to that of our managers' KPIs and OKRs, to that of our own. And like any good fog of war, it's fully visible at my product altitude level. So I have fully visible area, I have the foggy areas and the unknown areas beyond. But like a good map, it covers the entire product spectrum of the entire company. Because I don't just want a map of where I am working on right now. I want a map that I could use to expand my scope outwards, or even at my manager's level at some point. But at a high level, every single altitude, whether that's my manager's altitude or my altitude, contains three things: goals, possibilities, and solutions. Goals are easy. Those are the OKRs and KPIs that I've been assigned. They can also be goals and KPIs that I create myself that are better representations of the work I need to do and the goals I need to achieve. But the second are possibilities, and this is the hard one. Possibilities are the huge range of options that we have to pursue that help us reach our goals. And so these can be problem statements, they can be opportunity ideas, they can be entirely new concepts of how we approach our product experience or our customers' goals and jobs to be done. And each possibility needs to be quantified with quantitative evidence, but has a qualitative idea behind it. When qualified enough, with enough qualified data, enough quantifiable data, then and only then do we get into solutions. And solutions are our decisions that we have consciously made as a product manager on how to solve that possibility. This could be a feature itself, an actual feature that is launched in production. It could also be a tweak to an algorithm or a way that the product works. For example, with Gojek, we decided that every order that was made would be sent to a customer. That is a solution. Sent to a driver. That is a solution. But if a driver ignored that order or canceled that order, then we'd have to find a new driver, creating one additional bid. And so the beauty of the altitude map is it creates the ability for logical construction from goals to possibilities to solutions. Let's try an exercise. If I am the product manager of driver allocation, and my goal assigned to me is to increase that match rate from an order to a driver successfully creating a completed order to 17%, that is my goal. And if I go and do my user research internally, and a highest paid person's opinion comes up, and they say, why don't we just assign drivers to the orders so that they don't have to accept them? Immediately dispatch the driver, and you suddenly have a 100% match. Great, the KPI is done, and we're finished with our job. But of course, a good product manager doesn't just evaluate these ideas and take them off the table immediately. Let's try using the altitude map framework. I need to understand if this possibility that this idea solves for is real. And so if we take the idea as a good product manager, a good user researcher, and we try to distill what the answer behind that answer is, then I might say, well, what you're implying is that drivers aren't accepting orders. That is a possibility. And accepting that possibility as a logical reason for our goal not being met is an example of open-minded thinking, which is required for good decision-making. So as an open-minded thinker, I'm thinking, drivers aren't accepting orders. Okay, well, that solution is to force them to accept orders, force assignment. If this were 100% of the reason, the possibility that I am not meeting my goal, maybe forced dispatch is a good solution for this. But a good product manager doesn't just care about their goals. Again, this is an altitude map of the entire company. There are other goals in this organization that I need to be aware of. And so if I then take a look at what is the goal of my manager, well then, I might realize that this goal does not solve for their goals as well. Maintaining driver retention rates by 80% and increasing number of completed orders by 15%. Now, it may solve for that 15% goal, but if I realize and do more user research and collect more evidence, and I find out that drivers love our platform and retain because of the flexibility we offer them, because they know that they're able to pick and choose which orders they get to complete, well then I might actually have conflicting outcomes with my manager. And a good product manager who cares about their career will understand that if I win but my manager loses, we all lose. And so our solutions must serve not just our goals, but the goals of our manager, or at least not be in conflict with them. And so we need to keep making progress. We still haven't achieved our goal, though we have found and distilled a possibility from that suggestion using open-minded thinking. We need to still generate more possibilities before we can come up with an actual solution. And the altitude map helps you realize that when you don't have enough possibilities to work with, you're only going to come up with solutions that solve a bare minimum amount of possibilities. Coming up with these possibilities can be very hard. One way is to look at what feature did I just ship and what problem was that trying to solve for. But another way is to do a thought exercise. Everyone can close their eyes and list as many orange things in the world as they can think of right now. Every orange thing. And so I generally can think of an orange. But if I ask you to think of as many orange things as you can think of that are in a construction site, now I'm thinking vests, construction equipment, cones, many more concrete, pun intended, objects to help construct more ideas in my mind about what to think of, some concrete ideas. And so what is the concrete space, the sandbox of ideas that we can come up with in the possibilities generation? Well, I have 3 techniques here to help come up with these concrete ideas. They are called calculate, sequence, and segment. Calculate is an easy one. So if I want to calculate my KPI, all of our goals are generally broken down into some formulaic measurement. Calculate is about breaking down what that measurement is into its core components so that you can create inputs mathematically into what those levers are. In our case of match rates, my match rate is dependent on how many orders are ultimately completed, as in picked up a customer and dropped them off, divided by how many drivers needed to see that order in order for them to get to that point. And again, remember, every cancellation, every rejection, every ignore of an order created another bid, which inflated my denominator. The next step would be to sequence. Now, sequencing takes a look at that calculation and says, well, what drives that number up or down? It takes a look backwards into that product experience, distilling what exactly has to happen for that number to grow or decrease. And so in my case, I will have customers being picked up as my terminal end to a completed order. But if a customer is picked up, that implies that the driver reached the customer. It also implies that nobody canceled the order before that time. If customers didn't cancel the order, it also implies that a driver accepted the order at some point, that they didn't ignore it or not accept it. And if a driver was there to accept the order, it implies that they got the order. They got that bid on their phone and they were able to accept it. And you can break this down as much as you want. This map should fully expand. But you can start to limit yourself to the segmentation exercise, which should explain the who, what, why, when of each of those sequenced steps in the product experience. And so if I think about, well, if nobody canceled the order, great, but who could have canceled that order? Could it have been a driver or a customer, or our system just didn't allow that order to happen? And I can think about if a driver didn't accept the order, well, why not? Is it because they rejected it? They ignored it? And considering all of these details, if a driver did cancel the order or a customer did cancel the order, Is it because of their demographics? Is there something about the individual who? Is there something about the order itself? Was it that it was too far away, or that the amount was not enough? And these are examples of segmentation because they describe how each of those sequences are likely to happen or less likely to happen. And ideally, mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive versions of this look at the happened and did not happen. And the segmentation layer looks at these continuous variables that are ranges of options, ranges of values. And how do you know which segment is the right one to put here at what level? You can't. You can segment everything further all the time. You just have to guess and sometimes hope that you'll be accurate. The problem with doing product management is that it's very much an art and a science. And so the goal with altitude maps is not to always be right, but it's to be less wrong. And being less wrong helps when you can break things down from greatest opportunity, greatest area of work, down into its smallest components, all the way down to the right. And so there are a few safeguards, though. Remember, this isn't a map of just our product focus area. It's also revealing of the peers that we work with next to us at our altitude level. I am not the only person on my manager's team. There could be a PM of driver benefits focused on whether or not driver earnings are high enough or low enough, creating profit, creating strong allocation. Because remember, this altitude map is layers upon layers. In reality, as the driver allocation PM, I am only a possibility in my manager's altitude map. I am not a solution, I'm a possibility. There are ranges of possibilities that my manager has decided that there are ways to solve for their goals, their 15% increase in completed orders per driver, and maintaining 80% retention rates on drivers. And so if I suddenly think I want to focus on total earnings, well, I'm about to step in another PM's scope. And that's not really a bad thing if I think I can justify it, if I think I can partner with them. But it needs to be a conscious decision that I'm not really working on my product area if I'm working on someone else's. And so let's focus on our own scope first. I like to employ a method of moving left to right, focusing on the biggest chunks of work, and focusing on a narrow set of opportunities that are easy to calculate, and not going too far down this rabbit hole of segments until I have found enough evidence that gives me a win, stay, lose, shift mindset. If I run some data and there are good signs that this is the right place to focus on, stay, go down the rabbit hole. But if I do some analysis and it's only confusing me further, shift somewhere else, pick another node in the sequence section. And so my first analysis might be something like pooling the cancellations and acceptance data points. And here I'll find 55% of orders are not accepted or not completed. Something's wrong there. And I'll see, hey, someone mentioned cancellations aren't great. And that's true. 15% of them are canceled by a driver or a customer. But the biggest chunk of my KPIs issues are actually here. 38% of orders are ignored or rejected by a driver. Completely my driver's faults. And that is my focus area, driver allocation. I need to solve for this 38%. And so I might continue to do more and more analysis, try to size each of my first layer segments to be sure that this is the area of greatest opportunity. And I'll want to focus on collecting more evidence. And sometimes the fastest way to do this is just to get on the phone. Because the more time we spend on identifying additional evidence, the better that analysis and impact better be. Remember that analysis always takes work. And that means that analysis is of negative utility to a product manager. That's not to say we shouldn't do it, but it is to say that doing data analysis has diminishing returns. The more time you spend, the less time you spend on solutioning. And so the further down we get to those segments, if you have no idea what's happening, we want to practice that user research mindset again. Pick up the phone, collect small data points. The further down the segmentation that we go in our altitude map, the better some qualitative evidence will help point us in the right direction. And so I may update my map with all of these findings. What is the real opportunity here? Well, I have to define that before getting to my specific solution idea. The key possibility here is that drivers simply don't understand the mechanics and expectations behind accepting orders. When we called them, drivers were eating lunch, getting ready for work, taking a look at the app because it's so cool to see where everyone is going today. They were doing everything except working. And this made sense because we thought about it. Why would this be happening? This was the first smartphone that many of them had ever had. And so they had apps like Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram. Everything was entertainment. Why not the app that we used to give them work? And so we thought through the solution idea was to start with the simplest possible option. Just tell them, you are expected to accept orders, and not doing so hurts our user experience. Starting with the simplest idea is the fastest way to get more data that you need to refine the solution further. Because as product managers, we don't just ship features and never iterate on them, right? So we ran a test. We sent a series of SMSs. We sent 2 just to make sure it worked. But we did an A/B test, one where we told drivers, have a nice day, and another where we said, accept orders, because doing so, not doing so increases customer wait times by 30 seconds. And so running this experiment, we actually collected some evidence. We had a 2% lift in acceptance rates overall, but again, now we can do our segmentation that we've already defined in our altitude map. We could cut across those different segments on the right and identify that drivers who had recently signed up in tenure, new to the platform, increased their acceptance rates by 30% because they hadn't yet developed a habit in ignoring orders. We could easily change and shift that experience and that mindset for these newer drivers. And so what does that mean? It means that we can iterate on our solution and we can mark down the impact of this solution to that possibility that affects our goal. And so the new solution iterated again on this new data was that we could create a new driver onboarding experience through SMS for drivers who had just signed up in the last 40 days, and that was contributing to 30% increases in acceptance rates, a problem that we had experienced that associated with our order match rates needing to be increased by 17%. And this may not have solved the problem entirely, but this is just one loop of using the altitude map. The great thing about this map is that it is iterative in nature. You can think of all of these segments and the further segments that you could create down that rabbit hole as a fog of war. And the deeper down the fog of war you go, the more you carve back an understanding of it, the more understanding you will have about your product experience, the levers, the drivers, and you will never ever have to go back and backtrack and try an experiment again that didn't work the first time around. The ability to look at how many solutions are associated with each possibility helps you understand, do I have enough possibilities that I have considered to be a good decision maker? Am I doing enough open-minded thinking to consider new solutions for these possibilities that aren't working well? And do these possibilities all connect to my ultimate goal, or are they misaligned or conflicting with other product managers' goals? This is only a snapshot of what an altitude map can look like at a first look, But again, the simplest solution is sometimes to just send the SMS and tell the driver. So consider this your SMS. Think about the feature that you just shipped. What possibility was that solving for? What other possibilities have you not considered that might relate to a better solution? And do those possibilities really connect to your goal? If you need another example, I have a couple on the QR code above, and I hope that this was helpful. Thank you so much.